Hi all, my name is Shravani. I'm a Transport Youth Fellow with the High Level Champions, working towards COP27 and beyond for clean transport. I'm also simultaneously working on a full-time PhD at Warwick Manufacturing Group, where I am looking at the impact of people's travel choices and the overall well-being to be able to design sustainable policies for the future with the arrival of new technologies. And I'm here to talk about the importance of urban infrastructure in this session and what is the role of the policymakers and also the engineers to be able to reach the common goal that we all are striving for, but in the same pace. So we all understand that transport is one of the most talked about sectors, and it is very important as it leads to a lot of road fatalities, a lot of emissions, and for safer and cleaner environments. So how can we do this? Infrastructure plays a really massive role, especially at this time when there are so many disruptive changes with the arrival of not only new technologies, but also the behavioral aspects of the people. Everything is changing. So it is really important to keep in mind the overall people-centric impacts of the arrival of these technologies. So two things that I'm going to highlight in this topic is one is about the access to soft infrastructure. So we all talk about how infrastructure plays a really important role, but sometimes we only think about the hard infrastructure changes that is required in a city to be able to have proper access. However, soft aspects such as access to opportunities, overall well-being needs, and also access to finance is a major factor where it should be highlighted on with the help of the policymakers, the government, and the engineers. So with this, there would be a common pace of adoption from the people as a whole. Second is about asset usership rather than asset ownership. So if we can find out ways in terms of mitigation and adaptation for overall asset utilization, then it will be really, really wonderful because technology keeps on changing every 2-3 years. Now, for example, there is micromobility. Within a few years, there'll be autonomous vehicles, and now at the moment, there are also electric vehicles, but we should not forget the traditionally sustainable mobility, especially in the developing countries where mobility is a mode of economic opportunities rather than just moving around from here to there. So if we can build on such infrastructure where it is inclusive for all the vulnerable groups, including the elderly, gender specific, and also children and specially abled, but also with the traditionally sustainable modes such as NMT or active mobility, we can be respectful towards all road users. And that's where engineers and policymakers fall into place, where we can hand in hand work together towards a healthier, cleaner, and safer environment for our cities. Thank you.
Great, welcome back, and thanks to Shravani Sharma, Climate Champions Youth Fellow in Transport, for your insights on the future of transport. I would like now to introduce session 3, Transformations and Innovations in Engineering Delivery. For this session, we encourage you to submit questions. We will have an interactive Q&A part to this session for the panelists to answer live. This session will be moderated by Marcia Toledo Sutillo, and Marcia is the resilience lead for the UN Climate Change High-Level Champions. She's got over 20 years experience in designing climate programs, managing portfolios, and providing strategic direction to accelerate climate implementation. She has a key focus on adaptation and resilience pathways spanning 70 countries worldwide. She is passionate about climate and the role of nature to deliver adaptation and resilient outcomes for people and sectors. Finally, please let's keep the conversation going in the networking lounge and on social media. And now, Marcia, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina. Welcome to this session. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you. We're going to be discussing transformations and innovations in engineering delivery. In a world where growing urbanization, climate change impacts, pressure to decarbonize, technological advances, and increased interconnectedness, our present and new and complex challenges to infrastructure. Our traditional ways to plan, deliver, and manage infrastructure are no longer fit for purpose. So innovative and scalable solutions are urgently needed to transform and accelerate development and implementation of infrastructure that is fit for the future and best serves all of our communities. Innovation plays a big role in engineering delivery, and this is what we're going to explore in this session. Today, we have an impressive lineup of speakers, and it's my pleasure to introduce first Edgar Westerhof, who is the Vice President with Arcadis and serves as the Director for Flood Risk and Resiliency for North America. Edgar is a water consultant with 22 years of experience in integrated water management. He has deep understanding of urban and industrial climate adaptation concepts, infrastructure planning and design, sustainable urban water management and waterfront development, and international water management concept. Edgar led Arcadis' participation in the International Hydro Build by Design competition, including the winning BU Waterfront Resiliency Plan of Manhattan. In 2021, he joined ASCE to co-lead the International Climate Adaptation Working Group in collaboration with ICSI and ICE. Edgar has given master classes on resilience and climate adaptation at UPenn, Yale University, Harvard, Columbia, and Pratt, and is the contributing author and editor of the book Adapting Cities to Sea Level Rise and Blue Dunes. We also have David Smith, who heads Stantec's corporate and global strategy. He has over 30 years of utility and infrastructure experience and advises on infrastructure strategies using knowledge of trends and best practices from across the world. David has completed the University of Cambridge program for sustainability leadership. He is graduate of Harvard Business School's Advanced Management program and a fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers. He co-founded the ICE Heriot Watt Stantec Prestige Lecture Series on resilience and has co-authored recent publications and articles such as Community Futures and Beyond Sustainability. David is chair of the ICE Sustainable Resilient Infrastructure Community Advisory Board. Shakti Ramkumar is also with us, and she's the Director of Communications and Policy at Student Energy, a global youth-led organization empowering the next generation of energy leaders with a network of 50,000 young people in 120 countries. Shakti advocates for meaningful youth engagement and energy justice in the global energy transition. As a selected representative of the Youth for Climate Summit, she recently worked collaboratively with 400 people from around the world to draft detailed climate action recommendations for world leaders in the run-up to COP26. Shakti graduated from the University of British Columbia with a BA in Geography, where she was the co-director of Common Energy in UBC. We will now hear 3 short presentations from our speakers, and then we will move to an interactive Q&A session, taking questions from the audience. So if you want to ask a question, please submit it using the chat box function. So without further ado, I would like to invite the first speaker to present. Over to you, Edgar.
Yes, thank you. And let me share my screen here. Yeah, can you all see my screen?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for the wonderful and kind introduction. Transformation, innovation, and engineering. A couple minutes to touch on a lot of ground, considerations for sustainable urban revitalization, and really trying to focus on innovation. And this innovative topic has really been advanced past 2 years, I should say, where we collaborated with the American Society of Civil Engineers, building on their future world vision reporting. And I would really welcome you to take a good look at, you can scan the code here, but take a look at that reporting, as it's including a lot of aspects related to innovation. What is going to drive our urban environments in the near future. For this presentation, we will focus on climate change and adaptation, and the ground that we've covered as part of this Innovation for Sustainable and Resilient Infrastructure report. We spent about, I would say, a little bit less than a year together with ICSI and with ICE to explore, what defines an innovation champion when it comes to climate adaptation. We all know that it's not just about providing solutions. You have a challenge and you work your way to a solution. That's not what this world is about anymore. It's very much about being multidisciplinary, providing something that is, as you can say, holistic. Providing alternatives that better meet future needs, and really, try to push the agenda. Adaptation strategies very much need to consider climate mitigation. How can you develop something with a carbon or net zero strategies in mind? We also know that these solutions will need to be used and hopefully can also be profitable. There's a lot of best case practices we've assessed, that we have studied as part of this assessment, from Rotterdam to Houston to places in Brazil. You can see that in the QR code here. So, when we talk about, what drives innovation, what is an innovation champion, it's clear that we try to touch on, you can say, all the colors of the rainbow. And this is also very much about, leadership, defining leadership within the innovative topics. You see this wheel that we've crafted, and as part of the introduction, I was indeed leading Rebuild by Design, the competition post-Hurricane Sandy 2012. Rebuild by Design, as part of that exercise, we had to come up with an engineered process. What is our process going to look like, capturing as many innovative topics as we possibly could. Of course, it had to be integrated, as you see on the top left. It had to be sizable. How can we scale it up? How can we start small, but also make it replicable at a regional scale? I talked about multidisciplinary solution strategies, so not just for the sake of, say, flood protection, but also how can it be an advantage to the community? And have you actually heard the community in terms of programming, in terms of understanding their needs? And we've taken a lot of time, well over a year, as part of the Rebuild by Design Big U planning process, to really get into the heart of that understanding. So where you see the spinning wheel on the left, number one, you can say, this is your abstract ambition. But then you start to define, all the innovative topics, all the aspects that you want to address and need to address, with the challenges that can come with it. So that brings you in this iterative planning process, participatory planning, and that brings you eventually to an abstract outcome. And this is not just going through the cycle once. The big U, it is actually starting. The shovel is in the ground. A lower east side coastal resilience, that work is happening. It's being constructed. The second phase is being planned. So we are going through this wheel several times. And I think the fourth bullet, demonstrate risk, life cycle, and performance-based thinking is very much what is driving us as engineers, as planners going forward. Risk, we all know risk is probability multiplied by consequence. So what does probability mean? How do you work statistics? Is that just a matter of, working certain numbers with a chance of, say, a flood event to happen? Or is it also about, the risk of people, possibly dying, which is the way the Dutch handle it. And those statistics are quite different. So what kind of risk perspective do you bring to your environment? I think that's where the engineering world is making significant steps, policy steps. Life cycle planning is very important. We are not just designing for the sake of creating something that is easy to construct. It's very much about operations and maintenance, and making sure that the operation and maintenance cost, for example, are taken into consideration. Keep the investment cycle as low as you can possibly make it. And performance-based thinking. and performance-based also speaks to that breakdown that I've just showed you. What are the innovative topics, the grounds that you can cover? So all in all, a lot of leadership aspects that you need to think about. I think this speaks quite well through a very recent study just been completed. Please also here take a look at the reporting, the Law of Manhattan Financial District Master Plan, effectively the second phase of the U. This is where a lot of these topics come together. And for me as a planner, also an engineer by background, it's always fascinating to see where innovation sits. And in this regard, I would like to call out the virtual engagement portal. If you go to this website behind this plan, you see an engagement portal that is, was really pushing the boundaries on how we engage with our stakeholders. How do we make sure that all the voices are heard, not just in the initial planning stages, but also with this work now being advanced and going forward, because this part of the waterfront of Lower Manhattan will change drastically in the coming years. So coming to an end of this introduction, we also, of course, need to think about what is happening beyond, because we all know that this is not a Wall Street we are protecting. We don't have all the money in the world to do whatever we want. There's many remote places, remote coastal environments, more remote communities. How do we address these communities? How do we prepare communities that may not have the financial means? Also prepare communities with water to come, because for New York we are planning for the next 100 years with a range of 6 to 8 feet of sea level rise. Well, you see on the right side, not unique for New York, of course, but also many other places along the East Coast and the whole world. How do we prepare these communities for the water to come, and maybe prepare for nature eventually to take over? So this is also where I think we can all learn from each other. This is also a very important part, I think, of innovation. Innovation not in densely populated urban environment, but also more remote locations where we have many assets at risk, and maybe where we need, through zoning and other policy upgrades, to innovate our way about sea levels to rise. And with that, I would like to thank you all, and I'm looking forward to receiving some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edgar. I appreciate your presentation. It was really, really interesting. And now we have David. Please, David, to you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Okay. Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to join the ICSI Summit today, and particularly the session 3 on transformations and innovations in engineering delivery. Yeah, I'm going to focus on some of the driving factors and priorities for innovation in the infrastructure sector as I talk through. Now, some of this we've obviously already heard as we've gone through the sessions, because obviously we're all dealing with the kind of drivers that are out there, and you'll have your own thoughts on these as well, but I'll just give you my perspective. So I like to think of them in 4 groups of the big driving factors. Of course, we have climate change as one of those, hugely significant, and obviously we're all focused really hard on addressing that. We have social and demographic change, economic, geopolitical and market shifts, and incremental and breakthrough technology. And of course, with all these driving factors, there's a risk side to this, but also a big opportunity side as well. And it's interesting to think about these driving factors, but then to delve in a little bit behind them and think about the trends and actions that we're seeing behind them. What are some of the things that are coming through? So, for example, on climate change, obviously a big focus on decarbonisation, energy transitions, resilience, ecosystem restoration. Some of the things that are very, there's a lot of action behind at the moment. On social and demographic change, you've got the urban form evolution, which is quite different in different parts of the world. The continued migration to cities in some parts of the world, and then a little bit of moving out and development of suburban areas in other parts of the world. But in all cases, that urban form changing and smart mobility and different approaches. workforce ecosystems. So we know about hybrid working now. We all know about that. But that's changing demand patterns in transport, for example. Social focus on biodiversity protection, that going much more significant, and the recognition of the importance of that is growing, as with socio-economic disparity and addressing that, and social license. On the economic geopolitical side, you've got cost of living pressures, inflation, squeeze on affordability happening, and also what we call globalization 5.0, which is in response to sort of global security, pandemic effects, supply chain disruption. That focus more on having greater resilience and capacity in country supply chain. Some reshoring is a term that comes through, and investor focus on ESG, another important area here. And then on technology, electrification, new materials, artificial intelligence, automation, cybersecurity. I could talk about that one for a long time. And so, all these things are really important. And then importantly, what's the innovation side of that? And I like to think of the innovation in two ways, in terms of innovation in technology and innovation in approaches. So in terms of technology, lots of things happening: low carbon concrete, low carbon asphalt, new materials, nanomaterials, changing things like pipelining, water filtration systems. You've got loads of technology innovation in energy transition around renewables technology, battery storage, and then in digital, sensors, interconnectivity, analytics, real-time decisions. So there's lots of parallel innovation going on in technology, and this is having a really good knock-on effect. Some of that is incremental, some of that is big game-changing breakthroughs, and both are really important. And whilst technology innovation, is absolutely vital, I mean, my view is it's not going to solve everything, and we need innovation in our infrastructure approaches as well. And what do I mean by that? But I think that's like how we address things and how we do our work. So as an engineering community, embracing collaborative planning, for example, where we involve wider stakeholders, all parts of the supply chain in planning things out, allows us to think differently, do things differently. Embracing carbon accounting and carbon management as standard on infrastructure projects. Similarly, in doing our work on infrastructure projects, always making sure there's resilience net gain, and no detriment to resilience in what we do. And one of the approaches I like to use in terms of doing this is something called solutions hierarchy, which I use, which is really about driving a different way of thinking and broadening the engineering approach to delivery. So just turning things around, instead of thinking, what do I build? Thinking, first off, what don't we need to build? How can we solve things by removing the root cause of the problem and eliminating the issue? Can we do it differently by collaborating with other stakeholders, involving nature-based solutions? Is there a different way of doing it? And really challenging that. Can we get more out of operations through proactive maintenance, use of digital approaches to mean we don't need to build things because we operate it better? Can we get more out of existing assets, renewals and existing assets? Can we reinvigorate those in a better way? And then only lastly, do we need to build something new? And as we go forward, more and more, I think the sort of infrastructure solutions we come up with are going to be a blend of all those things in them. So I think in conclusion, our focus on alternative solutions, multi-stakeholders, working with multiple stakeholders like we've never done it before, and coming up with blended solutions, often that involve both the natural and built environment. These are all going to be key, and innovation is right in the center of this, both in terms of technology and new engineering approaches. And also the changing engineers' skill base needed to achieve this. that's going to be absolutely vital as well. So yeah, that's sort of my comments prior to getting into the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. That was fantastic. Great to hear you. And now we have our third speaker. Please, if you go ahead, it would be fantastic to hear about you as well, Shakti.
Thank you, Marcia, for the introduction. I'll be brief. So I'm Shakti. I'm the Director of Communications and Policy at Student Energy, and we're a global youth-led organization that empowers young people through energy education and capacity building, as well as training for youth to enter careers in the energy and infrastructure space. Okay, and so we work with a network of about 50,000 young people in over 120 countries, and our goal is to empower young people to first build foundational energy systems knowledge so that they know which aspect of the energy sector they may want to work in, and second, to build the tangible project management and delivery skills that they need to be able to actually develop their careers or to develop and implement their own energy projects in their communities. So in today's session, we've been talking about the driving factors to achieving innovation and some of the barriers and the gaps in this space as well. And from Student Energy's perspective, I'll speak about 2 projects that we're working on to accelerate innovation and to fill some of the most pressing gaps that we are hearing from young people around the world. One is called the Global Youth Energy Outlook, and the other is called the Student Energy Solutions Movement. So the Global Youth Energy Outlook, one big barrier in this space is a data gap on what young people actually want to see in the energy transition, what young people want to see in planning and climate action in their communities, and having a unified kind of data set behind young people's perspectives. So the Global Youth Energy Outlook is our attempt to fill that gap. So even though we focus a lot on energy education and capacity building for young people, we also know that young people themselves need a tool that they can use to empower their own advocacy. So the Global Youth Energy Outlook is the first report of its kind, outlining what young people want to see in their region's energy future leading up to 2030, and how they want to influence industry, communities, governments, and the project is entirely youth-led, and the initial findings will be launching this year. We currently have some of the very broad global findings up at studentenergyoutlook.org, which you're all welcome to check out. And we really hope that the Outlook will act as a data-backed advocacy tool for young people to take to their local, regional, and national governments, and that it will serve as a catalyst for governments and industry as well to better understand how to meaningfully work with young people on a more equitable playing field. And a few of the initial findings from the Global Youth Energy Outlook show that youth really believe that governments are the ones that need to create an enabling environment for climate and clean energy action and for young people to be able to enter careers in this space. A lot of youth see a lot of opportunity in urban planning and infrastructure in clean energy, but very few % of youth feel like their perspectives are being valued in this space, with under 40% of youth in the survey responding that they feel heard in this space. So it shows us that I think what we already know, that it will really take a multi-stakeholder effort to create the right mechanisms to get more and more people into this space. So we encourage all the industry professionals watching to stay tuned for the Global Youth Energy Outlook and to really incorporate it into your own careers or to in any scope of decision-making you may have access to. And at the same time, as we're building this policy advocacy piece, we are also directly funding young people through the Student Energy Solutions Movement. So the Student Energy Solutions Movement is a youth-led UN Energy Compact, and we're aiming to raise $150 million by 2030 to launch 10,000 youth-led clean energy projects. And the reason we're doing this is because young people are honestly still really seen as a very risky investment. And we want to change this. We know that there are millions of young people who care about climate change, who want to enter the sector, who are ready to implement projects in their communities. But many of them, because they're seen as high risk investments, they're not able to get started, even if they have everything else necessary to get to begin working in this field. So as to break down these barriers, we are using the Student Energy Solutions Movement to kickstart young people's community-led energy and resilience projects. And our goal with the Solutions Movement is not only to get seed funding into the hands of young people, but to also open source knowledge on how to develop and implement projects by making project development templates, funding mechanisms, and mentorship available to young people globally, as sometimes these routes to clean energy entrepreneurship require pursuing expensive training or are otherwise inaccessible or highly depend on connections that a lot of youth don't have. So we want to make this process transparent as possible to bring more young people into the infrastructure, resilience, and innovation space. So through the kind of policy advocacy that we're doing with the Global Youth Energy Outlook and the entrepreneurship training and capacity building we're doing through the Solutions Movement, we hope this will really kickstart innovation in this space and bring in a lot more young people who may have never seen themselves being leaders in this space, becoming so. So that's a little snapshot of 2 of the projects we're working on at Student Energy, and I'll turn it back over to Marcia for our Q&A.
Thank you very much. This was perfect. Great to hear you and your perspectives, Shakti, and as well Edgar and David. Despite the little glitches on technology we're having this afternoon, but very, very happy to be in this session. And we're going to be moving to the Q&A. And before, I believe I need to share the results of the poll that was launched before this session started. So I'm going to open the poll, which says, if I'm not, yes, the question was, in which topic area do infrastructure professionals more urgently need capacity building? And the 2 tied areas were system thinking and decarbonization. So excellent points that are very much related to the inputs that we heard this earlier. Now, I would say I'll pick a couple of elements of the 3 speakers, and then I'll go to the questions that we are having. So please continue to send your questions. We are collecting them, and we can then discuss them. I think from my perspective, key points are related to the action among multiple actors. How important is that collaboration across different sectors, multi-stakeholders across different levels? If we want to build resilience, important to integrate both efforts to do mitigations and as well incorporate adaptation measures. Building resilience involves incorporating perspective of people, of vulnerable communities. Impacts of climate change are affecting everyone. So very, very key points from Edgar and David in regards of deploying those solutions, bringing innovation, not only thinking about technology, but as well process and approaches that one can consider further benefits. Where are renewable energy cited? How can we incorporate benefits to nature? How nature can be incorporated in the technology so that brings additional benefits. I would say these are great points, and especially if we consider youth perspectives, so that we can incorporate that vision, that energy, that perspective as well of green job generation or furthering more opportunities because we have commitments of what is going to be future goals in regards of climate and energy. So thank you for those great inputs today. I will start with one question very fast for the 3 of you to give your one quick response while we collect still a couple of more questions from the participants. So the process of developing, testing, and scaling up innovations to implement sustainable and resilient infrastructure cannot be undertaken by one actor in the infrastructure value chain working on isolation. Who needs to come to the table, and how can this cross-sector collaboration be achieved? If we can have first Edgar, and then very quickly we go to David later, and then to Shakti.
Yeah, well, my we in America, we like to sometimes shoot from the hip. My initial response would be that we need to plan and think with the eventual owners in mind. So who is going to own, a certain solution, and they should be front and center in that planning process. So we try to, of course, make that planning process as smart as we can possibly make it. Smart meaning well informed, making sure that the right data is available. We have quite a few tools to do so. For example, benefit cost analysis. We can really guide how planning is taking shape. You know, what benefits are we trying to drive through our planning processes? And that's how we can control that dashboard to push our solutions into a certain outcome. Outcomes, again, that are being adopted by the owners to be, and that is the community. That is really, who should be front and center in this process.
Yeah, Eka, that's really interesting. So I've got a similar view to you that actually, it's that planning phase which is all key, and if we can get the right stakeholders together at that point, that's how we can drive the innovation. I think when we've got like new innovation, it's really good to try and be able to demonstrate where something's been tried before to help different stakeholders gain confidence in that solution. And even if it's only partial, it makes a big difference. So making sure we do that, and then in terms of the collaboration, if you've got the stakeholders together, I think the other key thing is that you've got to make that work. How do you drive that collaboration of stakeholders to action, and trying to make sure that there's someone who's kind of coordinating and help drive that action amongst the group of stakeholders is fundamental, in order to avoid it just becoming about talking about the issue and then it not moving to action. So it doesn't have to be someone's in charge of it, but you have to have someone who's on point to coordinate and follow through on the actions. And if you do that, I believe that makes a really, really big difference. That could be a city office, or it could be, any one of the people in the partnership. But that would be a key point for me.
Thank you. Shakti?
Coming from student energy, I believe obviously young people need to be a key stakeholder in this piece, and not only from like a nice to have, like we should involve young people, but because it will be absolutely key to involve young people for the success of any policy or any structural change in this sector. Young people are often closely integrated with their communities and are not so tied to the inertia of how things have been done in the past, but yet can still benefit from knowing what has been tried and what has worked and not worked, like David was mentioning. So I think for the downloading of these policies to the communities and ensuring that whatever innovation is being proposed actually responds to urgent and pressing needs in the communities, I think young people being treated as equitable stakeholders in the early planning process and not just the final process is absolutely key.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We have now a question for David. I'm sorry, it's loading a little bit slow, but it's coming in. So, David, with all the new tech and innovative approaches, how do we measure codes of practice as updated accordingly? Have we put measures in place?
Yeah, so yes, that's right. Like keeping the two in sync is quite tricky. So we should always think when we produce a code standard guideline that it's not for life. They do need to evolve and change. But often the innovations come along, don't they? And we need to encourage that people try things. It might be a little bit different to a code or standard. It might not actually be tried or tested. I think that's quite true with the nature-based solutions as well. That we don't know for certain quite how they're going to perform. I've got an interesting project we've been working on, which is basically a wastewater treatment works, which we're now calling an integrated constructed wetland, because it basically works as a wetland, but it's got a huge variety of plants in it. It's not, creating biodiversity. It's a designed wetland to actually treat the water to a very high quality. But it needed great flexibility from the regulator to embrace that and accept that there was not certainty in quite what it would produce. It's actually performing really well, but you don't have that same certainty. So there is a bit of a lag sometimes between the innovation and the guide or standard. But we need to keep obviously iterating around that and updating as we go along. I think the key is that as engineers and other professionals working in infrastructure, we embrace this approach and we move forward with it, and we utilize guides and standards to help us. But yeah, we try these things and we think this way. That's the critical thing, that we embrace the thinking, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now we have a question for Shakti. How do we enable consultancies and cloud organizations to employ and train more young people and capture their enthusiasm and energy?
Yeah, thanks, Philip, for the question. This is a really big one, and it's a question we often seek to help other organizations answer, whether it's governments or companies in the energy sector. Student Energy often works with them to set up their very first youth advisory board, to set up their first internship program, and to kind of do it right from the beginning. Because we've seen it, frankly, done poorly in the past, where internship programs or youth engagement programs have been really convoluted to access or have been really inaccessible to a lot of young people. And so we want to help do it right. So one way is you can reach out to us, Philip, anytime. We're happy to share more best practices on engaging and employing young people. But in a broad sense, our principles for kind of equitable youth engagement are, one, to compensate young people for their time. Many young people are working multiple jobs while in school and are unable to participate in a lot of decision-making processes or engagement processes unless they're able to be compensated for their time, particularly youth from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. So that's a huge one, is that budget commitment really needs to be there to meaningfully engage young people. And secondly, to continue training past just the initial phase of hiring. Young people recognize that the field is changing so quickly that they may need to shift sectors, they may need to shift departments and build up a whole new set of skills than the ones they learned in post-secondary or at their first job. So ensuring mechanisms for consistent mentorship and capacity building opportunities beyond the initial part of internship or hiring are very key. So two main ways is to, yes, fund young people whenever possible, and two, to continue the capacity building and mentorship beyond the initial point of engagement.
Fantastic. Thank you. That was great. We have a final question for Edgar. Were there any financial incentives to encourage innovation in the projects you shared?
Oh, absolutely. And to be honest, I'm really inspired also by Shakti's, perspective about bringing young people, future users, into the conversation, which is so vital. So when I showed the image on, Lower Manhattan Financial District, and that, a playful work that we are creating, it's very much about trying to see what the future beholds. Because how will people move around? How will open space be used? And that is very much about trying to be as forward thinking as we possibly can. Who knows how we move around in our city? Will we be using the FDR highway, for example, or do we like to move around on our e-scooters? It's a very fundamental way of looking to at our open spaces. So when it comes to incentivizing innovation, when it comes to climate adaptation, it's very much about that future thinking perspective. And that is why, we very much like to work with students. We engage at every single level as much as we can to gain feedback and make sure that is part in our planning tools, but very much also, how the spaces will be used, because that really is so important. We have only one or two pair of ears with the people that we work with, so we need all hands at the table when we do this important work.
Thank you very much, Edgar. So we're approaching towards the end of the session, and it's been really a pleasure to have the three speakers with me today. And considering that scaling up innovation and infrastructure delivery is a multi-stakeholder effort, infrastructure decision makers should come together with the engineering community, including private sector engineering firms, academia, civil society, youth groups, and be inclusive of the communities using infrastructure to ensure that innovative solutions are developed, tested, and implemented at scale around the world. This cross-sector collaboration will be key to accelerate delivery of infrastructure projects that support the UN Sustainable Development Goals and address the growing demand for climate-resilient infrastructure. I'd like to thank the speakers for their participation and insights, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you very much.